What if the greatest obstacle to a meaningful life was never the world around you, but the invisible prison within your own mind? Ancient masters warned that a person could possess wealth, power, and knowledge, yet remain spiritually lost because they have forgotten the one path that leads to lasting peace. Most never discover it. They simply grow older, never truly wiser. In this journey through the sacred path, you will uncover the timeless wisdom that guided philosophers, mystics, sages, and seekers across civilizations. You'll discover why suffering often begins with illusion, why silence reveals more than endless thinking, why mastering yourself is greater than mastering the world, and why the oldest teachings still hold the keys to a meaningful life. For a moment, forget everything you believe you know about success, happiness, and fulfillment. Ask yourself one simple question. If every possession, title, and certainty disappeared tomorrow, what part of you would remain untouched? Hold that question throughout this journey, because every ancient master, from forgotten hermits in mountain caves to philosophers walking the streets of Athens, spent their entire lives searching for its answer. Chapter 1. Why Suffering Becomes the First Teacher. There is an old saying whispered across many ancient traditions. The person who has never suffered rarely begins the search for wisdom. Comfort often lulls the mind into sleep, while hardship awakens questions that prosperity never asks. A life untouched by difficulty may become pleasant, but it seldom becomes profound. It is often in the quiet hours of disappointment, loss, or uncertainty that the deepest transformation quietly begins. Long before kingdoms rose and fell, wandering teachers observed something remarkable about the human condition. They noticed that every person, regardless of wealth or status, eventually encountered dissatisfaction. The palace could not prevent grief. Gold could not silence anxiety. Fame could not protect the heart from loneliness. This insight became one of the earliest foundations of Buddhist philosophy. Suffering is not an accident reserved for a few unfortunate souls. It is woven into the human experience itself. Yet the ancient masters did not stop there. They asked a far more important question. If suffering is unavoidable, what is it trying to teach us? Many people spend their lives treating pain as an enemy. They flee from it through endless distractions, constant activity, or the pursuit of possessions they hope will finally quiet the restlessness within. But the more they run, the more the suffering follows, changing only its disguise. The ancient teachers suggested another possibility. Perhaps suffering is not a punishment. Perhaps it is an invitation. Imagine an old traveler crossing a vast desert centuries ago. He carried water, food, and confidence, believing he knew every landmark. But after days beneath the relentless sun, a violent sandstorm erased every familiar path. His supplies dwindled. His certainty disappeared. For the first time in his life, he admitted he no longer knew where he was going. It was only then that he noticed something he had ignored before. High above the shifting dunes flew a flock of birds, always circling toward the same distant oasis. Had the storm never come, he would have continued confidently in the wrong direction. His suffering forced him to become humble enough to observe what comfort had concealed. Sometimes the storm saves the traveler. Our lives often unfold in much the same way. A failed business may teach patience that success never required. Illness may reveal the value of health that was once taken for granted. The loss of a relationship may expose hidden habits that silently shaped every conversation. Hardship strips away illusion with remarkable efficiency. It removes the unnecessary until only the essential remains. That is why ancient seekers did not celebrate suffering, but neither did they waste it. They studied it. Across mountains, forests, monasteries, and forgotten temples, many, who later became known as wise men and women, began their journeys not with victory but with disappointment. Some lost families, others lost kingdoms. Some abandoned wealth voluntarily after discovering it could not answer the questions haunting their hearts. Nearly every great philosopher's path began where ordinary ambition ended. Pain became their first teacher, not because pain possessed magical power, but because it shattered certainty. Psychologically, this remains true today. When life proceeds exactly as expected, the mind rarely questions itself. Habits become invisible. Assumptions harden into beliefs. Identity settles into routines that feel permanent. But when life unexpectedly changes, something extraordinary happens. The mind becomes receptive. It asks questions that comfort never inspires. Who am I without this career? Why do I fear uncertainty so deeply? What truly matters if everything else disappears? These questions cannot be purchased. They are earned. One ancient story tells of a young sculptor who dreamed of carving statues worthy of kings. His first attempts were crude. Every strike of the chisel seemed to ruin the stone. Frustrated, he nearly abandoned his craft. An elderly master quietly watched him before saying, "You believe the stone is resisting you. In truth, it is revealing your impatience." The words stayed with the young man for decades. Eventually, he realized that every broken sculpture had shaped the hands that would later create masterpieces. Failure had been teaching him all along. Our minds often behave like that unfinished stone. We imagine discomfort is destroying us, when it may actually be removing what no longer belongs. Pride, illusion, impatience, and false certainty rarely disappear through pleasant experiences. They are worn away through friction, like rivers smoothing rough stones over countless seasons. There is also another mystery hidden within suffering. It has the strange ability to awaken compassion. Those who have never experienced loneliness often overlook those who suffer alone. Those who have never failed sometimes judge failure harshly, but hardship softens the heart. It reminds us that beneath every title, achievement, and appearance lives another fragile human being carrying invisible burdens. Wisdom without compassion becomes arrogance. Compassion without wisdom becomes confusion. The sacred path asks us to cultivate both. This does not mean we should seek suffering unnecessarily. Ancient teachers never glorified misery. They encouraged courage, not despair. The lesson is simpler. When hardship inevitably arrives, receive it as a messenger before treating it as an enemy. Ask what it has come to reveal. Ask what illusion it has exposed. Ask what strength it quietly demands. Every season contains instruction for those willing to listen. Perhaps the greatest transformation begins the moment we stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and begin asking, "What is this trying to teach me?" That single question changes everything. The obstacle becomes the classroom. The wound becomes the doorway. The journey truly begins. Learn from suffering instead of escaping it. Chapter 2. The Seven Invisible Gates. Ancient legends often spoke of sacred temples guarded by 7 gates. Only those who approached with patience, humility, and sincerity were permitted to pass from one chamber to the next. To outsiders, these stories sounded like myths describing hidden cities or forgotten kingdoms, but the wisest teachers smiled quietly, for they knew the gates were never built from stone. They existed within the human soul. Every meaningful life, they believed, required passing through 7 invisible gates of transformation. No map could reveal them. No king could command them to open. Each gate appeared only when the traveler had become ready to cross. The first gate was awakening. Most people move through life guided by habit rather than awareness. Days blur together. Reactions become automatic. The first gate opens only when a person begins noticing the patterns that quietly govern thoughts, emotions, and choices. It is the realization that one has been asleep while believing oneself fully awake. Awareness changes everything. The second gate was humility. After awakening comes an uncomfortable discovery. There is far more we do not know than we imagined. Ancient philosophers often regarded humility not as weakness but as intellectual courage. Only an empty cup can receive fresh water. The proud mind refuses instruction because it believes it has already arrived. The humble mind never stops growing. The third gate was discipline. Insight alone transforms nothing. Many travelers experience moments of inspiration only to return unchanged because they never built daily habits around their discoveries. Ancient initiates understood that character is not forged through extraordinary moments, but through ordinary repetition. One calm response, one truthful conversation, one disciplined decision repeated countless times. Small choices become destiny. The fourth gate was compassion. As understanding deepens, judgment begins to soften. The seeker gradually recognizes that every person fights unseen battles. Ancient masters often said that kindness is wisdom made visible. Compassion does not excuse harmful behavior, but it refuses to let bitterness become permanent. A hardened heart cannot carry sacred wisdom. The fifth gate was courage. Sooner or later, every traveler must release something familiar, an identity, a fear, a certainty, or a comfortable illusion. Crossing this gate often feels frightening because the old self cannot accompany the new journey. Courage, the ancients taught, is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to continue despite it. Growth always asks for surrender. The sixth gate was stillness. Beyond constant activity lies a quieter intelligence. In silence, subtle truths become audible. Many mystery schools required long periods of contemplation before allowing students to continue because they understood that a restless mind cannot perceive deeper realities. Stillness is not empty. It is profoundly alive. Finally comes the seventh gate, integration. This is where wisdom ceases to be something remembered and becomes something lived. There is no need to speak constantly about virtue because virtue quietly shapes every action. The traveler no longer separates philosophy from ordinary life. Washing dishes, speaking kindly, keeping promises, facing adversity, all become expressions of the same inner harmony. The sacred path is no longer a destination. It becomes a way of being. One ancient elder described these gates beautifully to a young disciple. He handed him 7 smooth stones and said, "Carry them with you every day." Years later, the student returned, confused. "I still carry the stones," he said. The old man smiled. "I never asked you to carry the stones forever. I asked you to become them." The disciple finally understood. The gates had never been outside him. Neither are yours. You need not conquer all 7 in a single season. Some days you may revisit the first gate again and again. Even the wisest elders continued refining themselves until their final breath. Growth is rarely dramatic. More often it is quiet, almost invisible, like a tree adding one new ring each passing year. A simple daily practice can help you recognize your own progress. Each evening, ask yourself one question. Which gate did life invite me to walk through today? Was it awareness, humility, discipline, compassion, courage, stillness, or integration? Do not measure your life only by achievements. Measure it by who you are becoming. For every day you choose wisdom over impulse, patience over anger, truth over comfort, or compassion over resentment, another invisible gate quietly opens before you. And without realizing it, you find yourself walking the sacred path. Chapter 3. Plato's Journey from Shadows to Truth. There is an ancient story that has survived for more than 2,000 years, not because it describes a distant cave in an ancient land, but because it quietly describes the human mind. Few philosophical ideas have endured as powerfully as Plato's allegory of the cave. Although told in simple images, it remains one of the deepest explorations of illusion, perception, and awakening ever recorded. Imagine a group of people who have lived their entire lives inside a vast cavern. Since childhood, they have been chained so that they can look only toward one wall. Behind them burns a fire, and between the fire and the prisoners, unseen figures carry statues and objects that cast moving shadows upon the stone wall before them. The prisoners know nothing else. To them, the shadows are reality, the echoes are voices. The illusion becomes truth. Years pass. Generations come and go. The prisoners argue over which shadow appears first, which one is largest, and which one deserves admiration. They build entire beliefs around images that possess no substance. None of them realizes that everything they confidently discuss is merely a reflection of something they have never seen. Plato was not describing only ancient prisoners. He was describing us. Every age has its shadows. Some are inherited from family. Others come from culture, fear, pride, or unquestioned assumptions. Many people spend their entire lives defending opinions they never truly examined. They inherit beliefs the way they inherit a surname, without asking whether those beliefs reflect reality or merely habit. The greatest prison rarely has walls. It has certainty. The allegory continues with an extraordinary moment. One prisoner somehow breaks free. At first, standing up is painful. His muscles have never carried his weight. Turning toward the fire burns his eyes. Looking beyond the cave entrance seems almost unbearable. The light hurts. Truth often does. When he finally steps outside, the sunlight blinds him completely. Everything he once considered real suddenly appears small and incomplete. Slowly, as his vision adjusts, he begins to see trees, rivers, mountains, stars, and an entire world that had always existed beyond the cave. Reality was never missing. Only his perception was. This is how genuine awakening often unfolds. The first encounter with truth rarely feels comfortable. It disrupts familiar identities. It questions comfortable narratives. It exposes blind spots we did not know existed. The ego naturally resists because certainty provides psychological security, even when it is built upon illusion. Many people secretly prefer familiar discomfort over unfamiliar freedom. Ancient philosophers understood this well. Socrates spent his life asking simple questions that unsettled deeply rooted assumptions. Instead of giving people easy answers, he challenged them to examine the foundations of their thinking. This approach often angered those who believed they already possessed wisdom. Nothing threatens illusion more than honest inquiry. Consider the story of a young apprentice who studied under an elderly mapmaker. Every day, the apprentice carefully copied maps drawn decades earlier. He believed they represented the world perfectly. One afternoon, a weathered sailor entered the workshop, carrying a map stained by sea salt and storms. The apprentice laughed. "This map is inaccurate," he declared. "The coastline is completely different." The old sailor smiled. "The coastline changed years ago after an earthquake." The apprentice turned toward his master in confusion. "Why were we still copying the old map?" The master replied quietly, "Because most people prefer familiar maps over unfamiliar truth." The lesson remained with the apprentice for the rest of his life. How often do we navigate our lives using outdated maps? We may still believe we are incapable because of a childhood failure. We may continue fearing rejection because of an old wound. We may assume people cannot be trusted because someone once betrayed us. The event passed long ago. The map remained. Psychologically, the human mind is designed to create shortcuts. These mental patterns help us survive by simplifying overwhelming information. But what protects us can also imprison us. A painful experience becomes a permanent expectation. A single disappointment becomes an identity. Repeated thoughts gradually become unquestioned beliefs. Without realizing it, we stop seeing life. We begin seeing only our conclusions. Ancient seekers recognized this danger. Many mystery schools required years of disciplined observation before students were permitted to receive deeper teachings. Their goal was not merely to accumulate knowledge, but to remove false certainty. They believed wisdom entered only after illusion departed. This required courage, not physical courage, inner courage, the courage to admit, "Perhaps I have been mistaken." Few sentences possess greater transformative power. Imagine climbing a mountain through dense fog. Every step feels uncertain. Turning back promises immediate comfort. Continuing upward demands trust that clearer vision exists beyond the clouds. The sacred path resembles this climb. There are moments when old beliefs dissolve before new understanding fully appears. This in-between space feels uncomfortable, yet it is sacred. Many people abandon their search here because uncertainty frightens them. But ancient teachers insisted that confusion often marks the beginning of wisdom rather than its end. The mind that has stopped pretending to know everything has finally become capable of learning. There is another part of Plato's allegory that is often forgotten. The freed prisoner eventually returns to the cave to tell the others what he has seen. Instead of celebrating him, they mock him. Some become angry. Others insist he has gone mad. His expanded vision threatens their comfortable reality. Not everyone welcomes awakening. History repeatedly confirms this pattern. Innovators, philosophers, and truth seekers have often faced ridicule before recognition. Every civilization has resisted ideas that challenged familiar assumptions. The cave protects itself, so does the ego. This is why the sacred path requires both humility and perseverance. Seeking truth is not about winning arguments. It is about refining perception. The goal is not to prove others wrong, but to become increasingly honest with oneself. Every illusion surrendered becomes another step toward freedom. One practical discipline can begin this transformation immediately. Each evening, choose one belief you have always accepted without question. Ask yourself gently, how do I know this is true? What evidence supports it? Could another perspective also contain wisdom? Do not rush toward new conclusions. Simply cultivate the habit of inquiry. For every unquestioned belief examined, another chain quietly weakens. And somewhere within the depths of your own mind, another prisoner begins walking toward the light. Question 1. Long-held belief every day. Chapter 4. The mirror of the soul. Long before polished glass reflected human faces, ancient teachers spoke of another kind of mirror, one that revealed not appearances, but the hidden condition of the heart. They believed the world itself functioned as a living mirror, quietly reflecting our fears, attachments, virtues, and blind spots back to us through everyday experience. Most people looked outward. The wise learned to look inward. An old parable tells of a traveler who wandered from village to village, carrying a beautifully carved bronze mirror. Wherever he went, people gathered to admire its flawless surface. Yet something curious began to happen. Some looked into the mirror and smiled with gratitude. Others frowned with disappointment. Some accused the mirror of making them appear old, tired, or unkind. Finally, one angry man threw the mirror to the ground. "This mirror is cursed," he shouted. "It keeps showing me things I do not wish to see." An elderly woman quietly picked up the mirror and replied, "The mirror has never insulted anyone. It simply refuses to lie." The traveler continued his journey. The lesson remained behind. Life often behaves exactly like that mirror. When someone else's success immediately fills us with resentment, the event may be revealing an unexamined insecurity rather than creating it. When criticism devastates us, perhaps it exposes a fragile identity built upon approval. When small inconveniences provoke great anger, the reaction often says more about the observer than the circumstance. External conflicts frequently illuminate internal lessons. This idea appears across many ancient philosophical traditions. Stoic thinkers observed that events themselves are often neutral. It is our interpretation that creates much of our emotional suffering. Eastern sages similarly encourage students to examine the mind before attempting to change the world. Even Greek philosophers insisted that self-knowledge precedes wise action. The mirror always points inward first. Consider a king who constantly complained that everyone in his kingdom was dishonest. He trusted no advisor, suspected every servant, and believed betrayal surrounded him. One evening, a wandering sage visited the palace. Instead of offering advice, he handed the king a cup of clear water. "What do you see?" the sage asked. "My reflection." The sage stirred mud into the water. "And now?" "Nothing clearly." The sage smiled. "The kingdom has not become unclear. Only the water has." The king understood. A troubled mind distorts everything it observes. Modern psychology echoes this ancient insight. We all carry internal narratives shaped by childhood experiences, disappointments, successes, and fears. These narratives quietly influence what we notice, how we interpret events, and how we respond to others. Two people can experience the same conversation and leave with entirely different conclusions because each is looking through a different inner mirror. The outer event is shared. The inner experience is unique. This realization is not meant to encourage self-blame. Not every difficulty is a reflection of some personal flaw. Life contains genuine injustice, loss, and circumstances beyond our control. Yet even in those moments, we retain the freedom to ask a transformative question. What is this experience inviting me to understand about myself? Perhaps patience, perhaps forgiveness, perhaps courage, perhaps healthier boundaries. The sacred path is less concerned with assigning fault than with uncovering wisdom. An effective way to cultivate this awareness is through reflective journaling, a practice remarkably similar to disciplines used by ancient philosophers. At the end of each day, sit quietly for a few minutes and write responses to 4 simple questions. What stirred the strongest emotion in me today? What belief or expectation may have been beneath that reaction? What quality was life inviting me to develop instead? Patience, humility, courage, compassion, or honesty? How can I respond differently tomorrow? Do not write to judge yourself. Write to understand yourself. Over weeks and months, patterns begin to emerge. The same frustrations may point toward the same hidden fears. The same recurring conflicts may reveal lessons patiently waiting to be learned. Gradually, the mirror becomes less threatening and more illuminating. Ancient masters did not seek perfect lives. They sought clear vision, for the clearer we see ourselves, the less we are ruled by unconscious habits, emotional reactions, and inherited illusions. We become less interested in changing every mirror around us and more committed to polishing the one within. For when the soul becomes clear, the world often appears different, not because reality has changed, but because the one who is seeing it has. Chapter 5. Know yourself before you know the world. Long before universities existed, and long before libraries filled entire cities with books, there stood a simple inscription carved into the stone of the Temple of Apollo at Delphi. Thousands traveled great distances to seek answers from the famous oracle. Yet before they could ask about destiny, fortune, or the future, they were confronted by 4 quiet words. Know thyself. It was not merely advice, it was a warning. The ancient Greeks believed that anyone who attempted to understand the world without first understanding themselves would inevitably mistake illusion for truth. They could memorize every philosophy, master every science, and travel every kingdom, yet remain strangers to the person who looked back from the mirror each morning. Among those most deeply influenced by this command was Socrates, the philosopher who spent his life asking questions that few people wished to answer. While others debated politics, wealth, or power, Socrates returned again and again to one mystery above all others, the mystery of the human soul. He believed that the greatest ignorance was not failing to understand the stars. It was failing to understand oneself. There is a story told about a proud young scholar who once approached Socrates, convinced he possessed exceptional wisdom. He spoke confidently about justice, courage, and the meaning of life. Patiently, Socrates listened without interruption. When the young man finally finished, Socrates asked a single question. "What is justice?" The scholar answered immediately. Socrates asked another, "But how do you know?" The young man's confidence began to weaken. Question followed question. Every certainty slowly dissolved. By sunset, the scholar admitted something he had never imagined possible. "I thought I knew," he whispered, "but I have never truly examined my own thoughts." Socrates smiled gently. "Now your education begins." That conversation has echoed through history because it reveals an uncomfortable truth about the human mind. Many of us live surrounded by borrowed opinions. We inherit beliefs from our families, cultures, schools, and experiences. Some serve us well. Others quietly shape our lives without ever being questioned. We call them our beliefs, even though we never consciously chose them. The deepest prison is often invisible. Psychologists today describe something remarkably similar. Much of human behavior arises from unconscious patterns developed over many years. These patterns influence relationships, decisions, fears, and ambitions without announcing themselves. We believe we are acting freely, while hidden assumptions quietly guide our every step. The ancients understood this without modern science. They simply called it sleeping. Imagine a talented actor who has performed the same role for so many years that he forgets it is only a performance. At first, the costume feels unfamiliar. The dialogue must be memorized. Every gesture requires effort. But after decades, something changes. He begins believing he actually is the character. Many people unknowingly live this way. Some wear the mask of success because they fear appearing weak. Others wear constant kindness while quietly suppressing resentment. Some build identities around achievement, while others define themselves entirely by past failures. Over time, these masks become so familiar that removing them feels frightening. The mask becomes the self, yet beneath every mask waits something quieter, something older, something authentic. Ancient traditions across many cultures suggested that beneath our social identities exists an unchanging center, a place untouched by praise or criticism, success or failure. The sacred path is not about creating this deeper self. It is about remembering it. One old parable tells of a prince who was separated from his family as a child during a great storm. He was raised in a distant village, believing himself to be an ordinary laborer. For decades he worked in fields, convinced his life would never be different. One day an elderly messenger arrived carrying the royal seal. "You have forgotten who you are," the messenger said. The young man laughed. "I know exactly who I am." The messenger handed him a mirror engraved with the royal crest. "You know who you have believed yourself to be." Those words transformed his life. Notice something remarkable. The messenger did not make the young man a prince. He revealed what had always been true. The sacred path works in much the same way. It is not about becoming someone entirely new. It is about uncovering the person hidden beneath fear, habit, expectation, and imitation. Yet this discovery requires courage, for once we begin observing ourselves honestly, we encounter qualities we may prefer to avoid. Pride disguises itself as confidence. Fear often wears the clothing of caution. Envy may pretend to be justice. Even generosity can sometimes hide a desire for approval. The human heart is wonderfully complex. This is why self-knowledge requires compassion rather than judgment. Imagine cleaning an ancient temple buried beneath centuries of dust. The dust itself is not the temple. It merely conceals what has always existed beneath it. In the same way, our impatience, insecurity, and confusion are not necessarily our deepest identity. They are layers. The work is gentle removal. Ancient philosophers often practiced daily self-examination. Before sleeping, they quietly reviewed the day. Where did I act with wisdom? Where did emotion govern me? What fear directed my choices? What truth did I ignore? These questions were not asked to cultivate guilt. They were asked to cultivate clarity, because every honest observation weakens illusion. Every moment of awareness loosens another invisible chain. There is another reason self-knowledge matters. Without it, we unknowingly recreate the same struggles in different forms. A person who never examines their impatience changes jobs, yet finds the same conflicts. Someone who never understands their fear of rejection enters new relationships carrying the same invisible wounds. Circumstances change, ports remain. Ancient teachers therefore insisted that the outer journey can never advance beyond the inner one. The world reflects the traveler, not the other way around. This does not mean withdrawing from life. On the contrary, relationships, work, disappointment, and success become mirrors through which we discover ourselves more clearly. Every conversation becomes an opportunity to observe. Every challenge becomes another invitation to understand. The sacred path is walked both inward and outward simultaneously. One practical discipline can begin today. Set aside 5 quiet minutes each evening. Without judgment, simply ask, what emotion guided most of my decisions today? When did I feel most authentic? When did I wear a mask? What truth about myself did today reveal? Write your answers honestly. No one else needs to read them. Over time, you will begin recognizing patterns that once remained hidden. What once seemed like random events gradually reveal themselves as recurring lessons, patiently waiting for your attention. This is how wisdom quietly grows, not through dramatic revelations, but through honest observation repeated every day. Know yourself before you seek to master the world, for the person who understands their own heart has already begun understanding life itself. Chapter 6. Walking with the Unknown. There comes a moment on every sacred path when the road disappears. The familiar landmarks vanish behind you. The destination remains hidden ahead. You cannot return to the person you once were, yet you cannot clearly see the person you are becoming. This is the place where many travelers turn back. The ancients called it the threshold. Modern minds often confuse faith with certainty. But the wisest teachers understood the two are almost opposites. Certainty demands complete visibility before taking the next step. Faith takes the next step before complete visibility exists. One clings, the other walks. Across countless civilizations, pilgrimage became one of humanity's oldest spiritual practices. People crossed deserts, mountains, forests, and seas, not because the journey itself possessed magical power, but because walking into uncertainty transformed the traveler. Every mile required trust. Every sunrise demanded perseverance. Every obstacle revealed character. An old story tells of a woman who set out to visit a mountain hermit renowned for his wisdom. Before leaving, she asked an elder for directions. He smiled and handed her a small lantern. "This light reaches only a few steps ahead," she protested. "It is enough," the elder replied. Confused, she began the journey. Night after night, she wished for a brighter lantern that could illuminate the entire mountain. Yet with every step, the small light revealed just enough of the path to continue safely. Weeks later, she reached the summit. The hermit greeted her with a single sentence. "If your lantern had shown the entire road, you would never have learned to trust your own walking." Life often unfolds exactly this way. We long for complete certainty before making important decisions. We want guarantees before forgiving, absolute assurance before changing careers, perfect clarity before beginning new chapters, and undeniable proof before believing in possibilities beyond our current experience. Yet life rarely grants such certainty. Instead, it offers enough light for the next faithful step. The Stoic philosophers understood this deeply. They encouraged people to focus not on controlling every outcome, but on meeting each moment with virtue and courage. Likewise, ancient pilgrims did not attempt to command the weather or shorten the mountain. They strengthened themselves instead. The unknown became their teacher. Psychologically, uncertainty unsettles the human brain because it cannot easily predict what lies ahead. Our minds naturally create stories to reduce anxiety. Unfortunately, these stories often imagine disasters far more frequently than possibilities. Fear fills the blank spaces with shadows. Reality usually proves kinder. There is wisdom hidden within not knowing. When every detail of the future remains invisible, we are invited to cultivate qualities impossible to develop through certainty alone. Patience, resilience, humility, adaptability, and hope. These virtues cannot be purchased or inherited. They emerge only through the journey itself. Consider a sailor crossing an unfamiliar sea. No wind obeys his commands. No wave consults his plans. Yet experienced sailors do not curse every changing current. They study it. They adjust their sails. They trust both preparation and presence. The sea remains unpredictable. The sailor becomes skillful. So it is with life. The sacred path does not promise an existence without uncertainty. It promises that uncertainty need not become fear. There is profound freedom in accepting that you were never meant to control every chapter of your story. Some pages reveal themselves only after you have lived them. Some lessons become understandable only in hindsight. Some doors appear only after previous ones have quietly closed. The unknown is not always empty. Often it is simply unopened. Walk toward it with curiosity rather than panic. Take the next honest step, then another. For every ancient master eventually discovered the same enduring truth. The path does not become clear because we can see the entire journey. It becomes clear because we continue walking. Chapter 7. Aristotle and the Architecture of Character. Imagine meeting two people blessed with the same intelligence, the same opportunities, and even the same education. 10 years later, one has become a person of quiet strength, whose words carry weight wherever they go. The other drifts from impulse to impulse, forever blaming fortune for disappointments. Aristotle would have said the difference was not fate, talent, or luck. It was character, and character, he insisted, is never inherited whole. It is constructed slowly, like a magnificent temple built stone by stone through thousands of seemingly ordinary choices. This idea stood at the heart of Aristotle's philosophy. While many searched for hidden mysteries or dramatic revelations, he looked instead at the quiet rhythms of everyday life. In his view, greatness was not created by extraordinary moments alone. It emerged from ordinary actions repeated until they became part of one's very nature. Excellence, he famously taught, is not an isolated act but a habit. There is an ancient story told of a young student who traveled for weeks to study under Aristotle. Expecting secret doctrines and mystical ceremonies, he asked his teacher on the very first day, "Master, what is the greatest wisdom you can give me?" Aristotle did not answer. Instead, he handed the young man a broom. Confused but obedient, the student swept the academy's courtyard each morning before sunrise. Day after day, the task continued. Weeks became months. Growing frustrated, he finally asked, "Have I journeyed this far only to become a servant?" Aristotle smiled. "You believe wisdom arrives as a sentence," he said, "but wisdom first arrives as discipline. If you cannot govern your smallest actions, how will you govern your greatest decisions?" The lesson remained with the student for life. Whether the story unfolded exactly as remembered matters less than the truth it carries. Ancient teachers understood something modern culture often forgets. Our future is quietly rehearsed in our daily routines long before it appears in public. Character is invisible before it becomes visible. Consider the craftsman shaping marble in ancient Greece. Passers-by saw only scattered chips falling to the ground, They could not yet recognize the statue hidden inside the stone, yet each careful strike mattered. Remove one unnecessary fragment today, refine another tomorrow. Eventually, beauty emerged, not by accident, but through patient repetition. Human character develops in much the same way. Each honest conversation strengthens integrity. Each patient response weakens anger. Each act of courage quietly replaces fear. No single decision transforms a person overnight, yet thousands of small decisions eventually become a personality others mistake for destiny. Modern psychology echoes what Aristotle observed centuries ago. Repeated behaviors strengthen neural pathways, making certain responses more natural over time. The more often generosity is practiced, the easier generosity becomes. The more frequently resentment is indulged, the more quickly the mind reaches for bitterness. Habits do not merely influence actions. They gradually shape identity itself. Ancient philosophers understood this long before laboratories existed. They watched life carefully. They watched themselves. Aristotle also believed every virtue existed between two dangerous extremes. Courage stood between cowardice and recklessness. Generosity balanced between greed and wastefulness. Confidence rested between insecurity and arrogance. Wisdom was not found in excess, but in harmonious proportion. Nature itself teaches this principle. A river flowing too slowly becomes stagnant, flow too violently, and it destroys everything in its path. Balanced movement sustains life. So, too, does balanced character. There is another story preserved through generations about an elderly sculptor whose apprentice constantly complained about repeating simple techniques. "I already know this," the apprentice insisted. The old master simply handed him two statues. One had been carved by a beginner who rushed toward perfection. The other belonged to a master who had patiently repeated basic movements for decades. From a distance, they appeared identical. Only when sunlight struck the marble did the difference emerge. One reflected light with quiet elegance. The other revealed countless tiny flaws invisible to impatient eyes. The sculptor whispered, "Perfection hides inside repetition." So does virtue. In today's world, people often pursue dramatic transformations. They search for one book, one seminar, one breakthrough conversation that will instantly reshape their lives. Ancient wisdom points in another direction. It reminds us that transformation usually arrives disguised as consistency. The individual who becomes calm is rarely born calm. The individual who becomes trustworthy is rarely born trustworthy. Each has quietly practiced these qualities until they became inseparable from identity. Even setbacks become valuable building materials. Aristotle never suggested perfection was possible. He understood that failure belongs to learning, just as winter belongs to the changing seasons. Missing the path once matters little. Remaining lost by refusing correction is the greater danger. Every mistake becomes instruction. Every correction strengthens character. This is why ancient education placed enormous importance on mentors rather than information alone. Students did not simply memorize ideas. They observed how wise individuals lived. Knowledge spoken by the lips mattered. Knowledge demonstrated through daily conduct mattered far more. The world still teaches this lesson. Children imitate parents more than lectures. Communities imitate examples more than slogans. The soul follows what it repeatedly witnesses. Ask yourself quietly, which quality deserves your attention today? Not 10 virtues, just one. Perhaps patience, perhaps honesty, perhaps compassion. perhaps discipline. Choose one and practice it intentionally through every ordinary moment. Great cathedrals were never built by placing every stone at once. They rose through faithful craftsmanship repeated over generations. Your character grows exactly the same way. One conversation, one decision, one habit, one day at a time. Years from now, people may call your calmness natural, your wisdom effortless, your integrity remarkable. They will not see the invisible architecture patiently built through thousands of faithful choices. But you will know, because every noble life is first constructed within before it is recognized without. Practice one virtue consistently. The architecture of destiny is already rising. Chapter 8. The Stoics and the Kingdom Within. On a cold morning in ancient Rome, the emperor awoke surrounded by power beyond imagination. Armies waited for his command. Senators sought his approval. Entire nations depended upon his decisions. Yet before speaking to anyone else, he opened a worn notebook and wrote a reminder to himself. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Those quiet words belong to Marcus Aurelius, perhaps the most powerful man in the known world. Yet he understood a truth many ordinary people still struggle to accept. Mastering others is insignificant compared to mastering oneself. This insight became the foundation of Stoicism, a philosophy forged not in peaceful classrooms but in the uncertainty of real life. Wars, exile, illness, betrayal, poverty, political intrigue, these were not exceptions for the Stoics. They were the training ground through which inner freedom was discovered. Long before Marcus Aurelius, another remarkable teacher walked a very different path. Epictetus was born into slavery. He possessed no wealth, no social influence, and no political authority. By every outward measure, his circumstances appeared hopeless. Yet he would later become one of history's greatest philosophers because he discovered something no master could take away. Freedom begins within. When asked how a slave could speak about freedom, Epictetus answered with astonishing simplicity. You may chain my body, he taught, but you cannot chain my judgment unless I surrender it. Those words carried extraordinary power. Ancient listeners realized he was pointing toward an invisible fortress every human being possesses. This fortress is not built from stone walls or guarded gates. It is constructed from disciplined perception, wise judgment, and emotional self-command. Most people spend their lives defending everything except this inner sanctuary. They defend possessions. They defend opinions. They defend reputations. Yet the Stoics believed the greatest defense is learning to protect the peace of one's own mind. There is an old story about a traveler crossing the Mediterranean during a violent storm. Waves crashed against the ship with terrifying force. Passengers screamed in panic, convinced death had arrived. Among them sat an elderly Stoic philosopher. He remained astonishingly calm. A frightened sailor demanded, "How can you sit peacefully while everything around us is collapsing?" The philosopher pointed toward the captain. Does he command the wind? No. Does he command the sea? No. What then does he command? The helm. The philosopher smiled. So do I. He understood the difference between steering and controlling. The wind belonged to nature. The helm belonged to him. Life still asks the same question. You cannot command every event. You can always guide your response. This distinction transformed countless lives throughout history. Seneca, advisor to emperors and one of Rome's wealthiest citizens, repeatedly warned that anxiety often arises from imagining disasters that never occur. We suffer more often in imagination than in reality, he observed. Even today, those words feel startlingly modern. How many sleepless nights are created not by actual events, but by fearful anticipation? How many arguments begin inside the mind long before anyone speaks? How much energy disappears fighting imaginary battles? The Stoics encouraged careful preparation, never careless optimism. But they refused to surrender peace to possibilities that had not yet arrived. Reality deserves attention. Imagined catastrophe deserves examination. There is an important difference. Ancient military commanders understood this principle well. Before entering battle, disciplined warriors rehearsed adversity mentally. They imagined setbacks, losses, exhaustion, even defeat. Not to become fearful, but to remove fear's surprise. When difficulty finally appeared, their minds remained steady because they had already accepted uncertainty. Acceptance strengthened courage, denial weakened it. This inner resilience resembles an ancient fortress standing upon a mountain. Storms strike its walls year after year. Rain falls, winds howl, seasons change. Yet the fortress remains because its foundations reach deep beneath the surface. So too must human character. Outer circumstances constantly change. Health changes, careers change, relationships change. Fortunes rise and fall. But the individual anchored in wisdom possesses something circumstances cannot easily steal: inner stability. Modern life often encourages the opposite approach. Many believe peace will arrive once every external condition becomes perfect. They wait for ideal careers, flawless relationships, financial certainty, or universal approval. The Stoics quietly smiled at this illusion. If peace depends entirely upon circumstances, then circumstances become your ruler. If peace grows from disciplined perception, then freedom travels wherever you go. This does not mean becoming cold or emotionally detached. Stoicism was never the rejection of feeling. It was the refusal to become enslaved by uncontrolled emotion. Anger could be acknowledged without becoming cruelty. Grief could be honored without becoming despair. Joy could be celebrated without becoming reckless attachment. Emotion became a guest, not the master. Perhaps this explains why Marcus Aurelius continued writing personal reflections, despite carrying the burden of an empire. He understood leadership begins long before directing others. It begins each morning by governing one's own thoughts. The same invitation remains today. When frustration appears, pause before reacting. When criticism arrives, examine it before defending yourself. When success comes, receive it without arrogance. When hardship visits, meet it with dignity rather than panic. These simple choices strengthen the invisible fortress brick by brick. No one else can construct it for you. No circumstance can destroy it without your permission. Govern your response before events, because the strongest kingdom any person will ever rule is the one within. Chapter 9. Mastering desire instead of being mastered. The greatest prison ever built has no walls, no chains, and no guards. It exists quietly inside the human heart. Its bars are forged from one endless sentence: just one more, and then I will finally be content. Ancient masters observed this prison thousands of years ago, and they noticed something unsettling. The person who possessed little was not always poor, and the person who possessed much was not always rich. True poverty often began where desire lost its master and became the master itself. Long before philosophers wrote books, an old traveler climbed a lonely mountain to visit a sage renowned for his wisdom. The traveler had crossed kingdoms seeking the secret of happiness. He carried expensive robes, precious coins, and a list of ambitions longer than the road behind him. When he arrived, he found the sage sitting outside a small stone dwelling, drinking water from a simple clay cup. The traveler looked around in confusion. "Master," he asked, "where are your possessions?" The old man smiled gently before asking a question of his own. "Where are yours?" The traveler laughed. "I am only passing through." "So am I," the sage replied. Those 4 words echoed through generations. Because they exposed a truth many spend an entire lifetime avoiding. Every possession, every title, every achievement is temporary. We are all travelers, yet many build their identity around things they cannot keep forever. Ancient teachers did not condemn wealth, comfort, or success. They warned against something far more dangerous, becoming emotionally dependent upon them. They understood that the object itself rarely enslaves anyone. Attachment does. Early Buddhist wisdom described craving as a fire that grows stronger the more it is fed. Most people imagine satisfaction arrives when desire is fulfilled. Yet anyone who has achieved a long-sought goal knows another desire often appears almost immediately. A larger home, greater recognition, more influence, another accomplishment. The horizon keeps moving. The thirsty mind rarely says, "Enough." This observation can feel uncomfortable because modern life often celebrates endless acquisition. Every advertisement whispers that fulfillment lies just beyond the next purchase, the next promotion, the next possession. But ancient philosophers noticed something curious. The happiest individuals were often those who desired wisely rather than endlessly. Desire itself was never the enemy. Blind desire was. The Stoics expressed this beautifully. Seneca, though immensely wealthy, repeatedly reminded himself that wealth was safest in the hands of someone capable of living without it. He practiced simplicity, not because comfort was evil, but because dependence weakens freedom. If your peace disappears whenever circumstances change, then circumstances have become your ruler. This is why many ancient schools occasionally practiced voluntary simplicity. A respected teacher might sleep on the ground for a few nights, or eat plain bread instead of lavish meals. These exercises were not acts of punishment. They were reminders. I can remain whole without excess. What remarkable freedom that creates. Imagine 2 merchants living in the same prosperous city. The first constantly compares himself with richer neighbors. Every success quickly becomes ordinary because someone else possesses more. Gratitude fades. Restlessness grows. The second merchant works diligently, enjoys honest prosperity, and appreciates each blessing without measuring his life against another's fortune. Both earn the same income. Only one experiences abundance. The difference lies not in possessions, but in perception. Ancient wisdom repeatedly returned to this lesson because it understood a profound psychological truth. Desire expands wherever attention constantly compares. Gratitude expands wherever attention appreciates. The mind cannot endlessly compare and deeply appreciate at the same time. One creates hunger. The other creates peace. There is an old Persian tale about a king who owned magnificent palaces, yet slept poorly every night. Convinced another kingdom possessed greater treasures, he became obsessed with acquiring more. One evening he encountered a shepherd resting beneath the stars. The shepherd owned little beyond his staff, a blanket and a small flock, yet he laughed easily, sang freely, and slept soundly. The king asked, "How can you be happier than I?" the shepherd answered. "Because I stop counting what belongs to others." The king returned to his palace, carrying a heavier treasure than gold: perspective. That story remains timeless because comparison has changed remarkably little. The objects differ. Human nature does not. Plastering desire does not mean extinguishing ambition. It means allowing purpose to guide ambition rather than insecurity. It means working toward meaningful goals without believing your worth depends upon achieving them. It means enjoying success without fearing its loss every waking moment. Freedom begins there, because the greatest treasures are not merely collected. They are cultivated. Practice moderation. Protect gratitude. Let purpose lead desire, not the other way around. The one who governs desire becomes wealthier than the one who endlessly satisfies it. Chapter 10. Mortality. Life's greatest teacher. Imagine waking tomorrow with absolute certainty that only 1 year of your life remained. Which arguments would suddenly seem meaningless? Which ambitions would lose their power? Which people would become infinitely more precious? Ancient philosophers returned to these questions again and again because they believed the awareness of death does not diminish life. Properly understood, it illuminates it. Among many ancient traditions existed a quiet practice that modern minds often misunderstand. Wise men and women regularly reflected upon mortality, not from despair, but from gratitude. They believed remembering life's brevity stripped away illusion and revealed what truly deserved attention. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, wrote often about the fleeting nature of existence. He watched generals, senators, merchants, and kings rise into greatness only to disappear into history. Their victories, failures, fears, and triumphs all eventually belonged to memory. His conclusion was remarkably simple: if everything passes, then live honorably while you are here. Not perfectly, honorably. There is an old story about a sculptor who spent nearly 50 years carving a single magnificent temple entrance. Visitors questioned why he devoted so much time to work that future generations would appreciate more than his own. The sculptor smiled without stopping his chisel. "I do not carve because I will remain," he answered. "I carve because beauty should." He understood mortality differently. Knowing he would not live forever gave greater meaning to every careful strike against the stone. Awareness became purpose. Ancient Japanese gardeners held similar wisdom. Some planted cedar trees knowing they would never sit beneath their full shade. Yet they planted anyway because they understood life is measured not merely by what we receive, but also by what we leave behind. Mortality expands generosity. The person who believes time is endless postpones important conversations. Forgiveness can wait. Gratitude can wait. Dreams can wait. Love can wait. But the individual who remembers life's uncertainty begins speaking differently, listening more deeply, and wasting less energy upon trivial conflicts. Impermanence creates clarity. This does not mean living in constant fear of death. Ancient philosophers strongly rejected fearful obsession. Instead, they encouraged peaceful familiarity with life's natural rhythm. Birth and death belong to the same mysterious order, just as sunrise and sunset belong to the same day. The seasons never apologize for changing, neither does life. There is a beautiful story from ancient China about an elderly calligrapher whose students admired the extraordinary calm reflected in every brushstroke. One day they asked the secret behind his peaceful mastery. The old teacher quietly lit a candle. "When I was young," he said. I believed this flame would burn forever. I hurried, competed, and feared every shadow. He paused as the candle slowly shortened. Then I realized the flame was always finite. The room became silent. From that day forward, he continued, I stopped asking how long I would burn and began asking how brightly. His students never forgot the lesson. Neither should we. Modern psychology increasingly recognizes what ancient thinkers intuitively understood. Awareness of mortality often leads people to reevaluate priorities, strengthen relationships, express gratitude more freely, and pursue lives aligned with deeper values rather than temporary distractions. Death, paradoxically, teaches life. It reminds us that every ordinary morning is extraordinary because it will never come again. Every shared meal is unique. Every conversation may become unforgettable. Every act of kindness carries eternal influence beyond our ability to measure. This realization softens pride. It weakens resentment. It dissolves unnecessary urgency. When viewed through the lens of mortality, many of today's frustrations lose their enormous importance. The delayed promotion, the minor insult, the endless comparison with others, all begin to shrink before the greater miracle of simply being alive. Ancient wisdom therefore encouraged people to end each day with quiet reflection. Did I speak honestly? Did I act justly? Did I love generously? Did I leave someone's burden lighter than I found it? These questions matter because time moves in only one direction. No philosopher has ever negotiated another yesterday. No emperor ever purchased one additional hour. Every life eventually becomes a completed story. The only remaining question is what kind of story it will become. Do not allow mortality to frighten you. Allow it to awaken you. Let it remind you to forgive while forgiveness is possible, to serve while strength remains, to appreciate before absence teaches appreciation for you, to become the person you hope future generations remember. Not through fame, but through quiet goodness. Let mortality sharpen your priorities, because the awareness that life is finite is not the end of wisdom. It is often where wisdom truly begins. Chapter 11, Gratitude, the Secret of Prosperity. One of the oldest practices shared across ancient civilizations had nothing to do with wealth, power, or conquest. Before kings celebrated victories, before farmers gathered harvests, before philosophers began their lessons, many paused for a simple act that modern life often overlooks. They gave thanks before they knew what tomorrow would bring. To the ancient mind, gratitude was never merely a polite emotion. It was a discipline of perception. They believed a grateful heart saw opportunities that an anxious heart walked past every day. An old story from the hills of ancient Anatolia tells of two neighboring villages struck by several seasons of poor harvests. The fields had become dry, the rivers thinner each year, and uncertainty settled over every household. In the first village, every conversation revolved around scarcity. There is never enough. The land has abandoned us. The future will only become worse. Day after day, these words became the language of the community. Hope quietly disappeared long before the crops did. Yet, in the neighboring village, something different unfolded. Every dawn, the village elder gathered the people beneath an ancient olive tree. Before anyone began working, each person named one blessing that still remained. One thanked the well that still held water. Another thanked healthy children. Another thanked faithful neighbors. Another thanked strong hands capable of working another day. Nothing magical happened overnight. Rain did not immediately fall from the heavens. Their fields were not instantly transformed into abundance. But something far more important changed first: their eyes, because gratitude altered what they noticed. Instead of seeing only what was missing, they began recognizing resources they had ignored. Families shared tools. Neighbors exchanged seeds. Older farmers passed forgotten techniques to younger generations. Creativity returned because despair loosened its grip. When rains finally arrived months later, the second village recovered far more quickly than the first. The difference was not fortune alone, it was perception. Ancient wisdom repeatedly returns to this lesson because the human mind naturally searches for what it expects to find. A fearful mind detects threats. A resentful mind collects offenses. A grateful mind discovers possibilities hidden within ordinary moments. Gratitude does not deny difficulty. It simply refuses to let difficulty become the whole story. The Stoic Emperor Marcus Aurelius practiced this quietly each morning. Rather than demanding that life become easier, he reminded himself of the privilege of simply being alive. To awaken each morning, he reflected, is already a gift. Notice how radically different this attitude is from modern habits of constant comparison. Many people begin each day measuring themselves against strangers. Someone has more money. Someone enjoys greater success. Someone appears happier. Comparison quietly convinces mind that life is perpetually incomplete. Gratitude interrupts that illusion. It gently asks another question. What beauty have I stopped noticing? Ancient temple traditions often included ceremonies of thanksgiving long before the harvest was gathered. Outsiders sometimes misunderstood these rituals, believing they celebrated success prematurely, but the elders knew exactly what they were doing. Gratitude was preparing the soul. The farmer who appreciated today's seed cared for tomorrow's harvest with greater patience. The merchant, grateful for honest customers, served them more faithfully. The parent, grateful for a child, nurtured that relationship with greater tenderness. Appreciation transformed behavior. Behavior transformed outcomes. There is an old proverb that says, "The thankful shepherd counts sheep differently than the fearful shepherd." At first glance, the saying appears simple, yet it carries remarkable psychological depth. Fear counts what might disappear. Gratitude counts what still remains. Modern psychology increasingly supports this ancient observation. People who regularly practice gratitude often become more resilient during hardship, more attentive to supportive relationships, and better equipped to solve problems under pressure. Their circumstances may not immediately improve, but their ability to respond certainly does. The ancients would not have found this surprising. They believed the quality of attention shapes the quality of life. There is another story about a young apprentice studying under an elderly gardener famous throughout the region. Visitors admired the breathtaking beauty of his gardens and assumed he possessed rare seeds unavailable to others. The apprentice searched everywhere for these secret plants, but found only ordinary flowers growing in ordinary soil. Finally, he asked, "Master, where do you hide your finest seeds?" The gardener laughed softly. "I do not grow uncommon flowers. Then why does your garden flourish while others struggle?" The old man knelt beside a tiny blossom. "Because every morning," he said, "I care deeply for what has already appeared instead of mourning what has not." That answer changed the apprentice forever. Great lives resemble great gardens. Attention determines growth, neglect invites decline. This principle reaches far beyond gardens. Gratitude nurtures friendships before they fade. It protects marriages before resentment grows. It strengthens health before illness reminds us of its value. It deepens ordinary mornings until they become extraordinary memories. So often people postpone gratitude until some future achievement finally arrives. I'll be thankful when I earn more, when I retire, when life becomes easier, when circumstances improve. Ancient teachers gently reverse the order. Become grateful first, not because life is perfect, but because gratitude prepares the heart to recognize blessings that anxiety keeps hidden. Worn abundance almost always precedes outer fulfillment, not because gratitude guarantees success, but because it transforms the person pursuing it. Tonight, before sleep finds you, pause for one quiet moment. Name 3 ordinary blessings you overlooked today. Perhaps clean water, perhaps laughter, perhaps someone who remained beside you through difficult times, perhaps simply another sunrise. Give thanks before seeking more. The soul that learns to treasure what it already holds rarely remains poor for long. Chapter 12. Courage, the path of the fearless soul. When most people imagine courage, they picture clashing swords, charging armies, or heroes standing triumphantly upon a battlefield. Yet the ancient masters often spoke of another kind of courage, one rarely celebrated, rarely applauded, and almost never noticed by the crowd. They believed the greatest victories were often won in complete silence, inside the human heart, long before they were ever seen by the world. An old story from ancient Greece tells of a young warrior preparing for his first campaign. For months he trained relentlessly, strengthening his body, sharpening his weapons, and learning every strategy his commanders could teach. The night before battle, unable to sleep, he sought out an elderly veteran who had survived countless wars. "I am afraid," the young soldier admitted. "I thought courage meant never feeling fear." The old warrior looked toward the stars before answering. "No, courage means walking forward while fear walks beside you." Those words transformed the young man's understanding forever. The ancients never believed courage required the absence of fear. They believed courage required refusing to surrender leadership to fear. That distinction changes everything. History remembers warriors for battles fought against visible enemies. But philosophers reminded us that every human being faces invisible battles no armor can protect against. The fear of failure, the fear of rejection, the fear of speaking the truth, the fear of beginning again, the fear of becoming who we were meant to be. These are the battles that quietly shape entire lives. Aristotle described courage as the balanced path between 2 dangerous extremes. One extreme was cowardice, the refusal to act because fear ruled every decision. The other was recklessness, the refusal to recognize genuine danger. True courage walked the narrow road between them. It acknowledged fear without obeying it. This balanced understanding appears throughout ancient traditions. The Stoics admired calmness under pressure more than dramatic displays of bravery. They observed that anyone could become reckless during moments of excitement. Remaining composed when emotions demanded panic required far greater strength. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire surrounded by war, disease, and political betrayal. Yet his private writings reveal remarkably little obsession with appearing fearless. Instead, he repeatedly asked himself a quieter question: what is the right thing to do now? Notice the wisdom hidden there. Not how do I eliminate fear, not how do I appear strong. Simply, what is right? Purpose often succeeds where confidence fails. There is an old Eastern tale about a bridge crossing a deep mountain gorge. Every traveler hesitated before stepping onto its narrow wooden planks. One day a child crossed the bridge more peacefully than all the adults. Surprised, an old monk asked, "Were you not afraid?" The child smiled. "I was." "Then why didn't you stop?" "Because my father was waiting on the other side." Fear remained. Trust became greater. Many of life's greatest decisions follow this same pattern. The entrepreneur begins despite uncertainty. The parent sacrifices despite exhaustion. The student studies despite self-doubt. The friend apologizes despite wounded pride. None of these actions eliminate fear. They simply choose something more valuable than fear. Ancient initiations often tested this inner bravery in unexpected ways. Rather than sending every student into physical danger, many teachers required them to spend long periods in solitude, confess uncomfortable truths, or remain silent while criticism surrounded them. Why? Because they understood that mastering the mind required greater endurance than mastering an opponent. Anyone can react. Few can remain steady. Anyone can speak. Few can speak wisely. Anyone can fight. Few can forgive. Moral courage has always outlasted physical strength. There is another story about a village judge renowned for his fairness. One afternoon, a wealthy nobleman attempted to bribe him before an important trial. The judge quietly pushed the gold aside. The nobleman laughed. "Do you realize how much you are refusing?" The judge nodded. "Yes." "Then why refuse?" "Because keeping my character is worth more." No crowds applauded. No songs were written. Yet history has been quietly shaped by thousands of such unseen acts of integrity. This is the courage that builds civilizations. The courage to remain honest when deception would be easier. To remain kind when bitterness feels justified. To remain patient when anger promises immediate satisfaction. To continue walking the right path after everyone else has chosen another. These moments rarely make headlines, but they shape souls. Modern psychology offers language for what the ancients already knew. Courage grows through repeated exposure to manageable challenges. Every time we face a fear without allowing it to govern us, the mind learns a new possibility. Confidence is often the consequence of courage, not its prerequisite. The first truthful conversation feels difficult. The second becomes easier. The 10th begins to feel natural. Character expands each time. Fear loses another small piece of territory. Remember the old warrior's words, "Fear may walk beside you. It does not have to lead you." Today, you will almost certainly encounter one decision that invites hesitation. Perhaps speaking honestly, perhaps forgiving someone, perhaps beginning the work you have postponed, perhaps simply believing in yourself once more. Choose courage in that one small decision, because great lives are rarely transformed by one spectacular act of bravery. They are transformed by countless quiet moments in which ordinary people choose principle over comfort, truth over convenience, and purpose over fear. That is the courage the ancient masters admired most, the courage no one may ever see, except the person becoming stronger because of it. Chapter 13. Compassion, the balance of mercy and strength. An old traveler once came upon two judges who were famous throughout neighboring kingdoms. The first judge was feared because he punished every mistake without exception. The second was loved because he forgave every offense without question. Curious, the traveler asked an aged philosopher which judge possessed greater wisdom. The philosopher shook his head. Neither. One has forgotten mercy. The other has forgotten justice. Then he added quietly, "True compassion is neither softness nor severity. It is strength disciplined by wisdom." Those words have echoed through centuries because they reveal one of the greatest misunderstandings about compassion. Many people confuse kindness with weakness, believing a compassionate person simply accepts every wrong, avoids every difficult conversation, or allows others to cross every boundary. Ancient masters taught something entirely different. To them, compassion was not surrender. It was one of the highest expressions of inner mastery. Throughout history, nearly every great philosopher discovered the same paradox. The stronger a person became within, the gentler they often became without. This was not because they lacked conviction. It was because they no longer needed anger to prove their strength. A mighty oak does not shout to convince the forest that it is tall. Its presence speaks for itself. So does genuine character. There is an old story from ancient China about a village teacher known for settling disputes that had divided families for generations. Two brothers once arrived before him after years of bitter conflict over inherited land. Each demanded justice. Each insisted the other had acted dishonorably. The teacher listened for hours without interruption. When they finally fell silent, he asked only one question. "When did you stop remembering that you were brothers?" Neither man answered. For several minutes, the room remained completely still. At last, the older brother began to weep, not because he had won, but because he suddenly remembered what had truly been lost. The land had never been the deepest wound. The relationship was. The teacher eventually helped divide the property fairly, but his greatest accomplishment lay elsewhere. He reminded both men that justice without compassion creates resentment, while compassion without wisdom invites disorder. Balance creates healing. This delicate balance fascinated ancient thinkers. Confucius taught that a noble person cultivates benevolence while remaining devoted to righteousness. Aristotle believed virtue always avoided destructive extremes. The Stoics encouraged patience without abandoning responsibility. Across different cultures, the language varied, but the principle remained remarkably consistent. Kindness must possess a backbone. Strength must possess a heart. Consider the life of Marcus Aurelius. He ruled an empire constantly threatened by war, betrayal, and political intrigue. His decisions often carried enormous consequences. Yet within his private reflections, he continually reminded himself not to hate those who acted unjustly. He recognized an uncomfortable truth. People often cause harm because they themselves remain trapped by ignorance, fear, or uncontrolled desire. Understanding this did not excuse wrongdoing. It explained it. An explanation often becomes the first doorway toward compassion. Modern psychology quietly supports this ancient insight. Hurt people frequently hurt others. Fear spreads fear. Anger often conceals grief. Control frequently hides insecurity. When we begin recognizing unseen burdens within others, judgment becomes slower. Compassion grows naturally. There is another story, preserved among desert travelers, about an elderly caravan leader crossing harsh wilderness with several young apprentices. One afternoon, they encountered a stranger collapsed beside the road, exhausted and desperate for water. One apprentice whispered, "Master, what if he intends to rob us?" The old man answered calmly, then we shall remain cautious." Another asked, "Should we leave him?" The leader shook his head. "If hardship has made him dangerous, then hardship has already punished him enough." The travelers offered water while remaining watchful. They showed mercy without abandoning wisdom. That is compassion. Many imagine forgiveness means pretending no injury occurred. Ancient teachers rarely described it that way. Instead, they understood forgiveness as releasing the poison of resentment from one's own heart. Holding anger forever resembles carrying burning coals while hoping another person gets burned. The hands that suffer most belong to the one refusing to let go. Forgiveness, therefore, becomes an act of freedom, not denial. Freedom. This does not always require immediate reconciliation. Trust may still need rebuilding. Justice may still require action. Boundaries may still remain necessary. Compassion does not erase discernment. It simply removes hatred from the equation. Imagine two physicians treating the same illness. One becomes furious with every patient. The other calmly diagnoses the disease while remaining committed to healing. Which serves humanity more effectively? Ancient philosophers believed moral failures should often be approached with similar wisdom. Condemn harmful actions when necessary, but never forget the humanity of the individual behind them. That perspective requires extraordinary strength. It is much easier to hate, much easier to judge, much easier to divide the world into heroes and villains. Compassion asks something harder. It asks us to see complexity, to recognize that every person carries invisible battles, hidden fears, forgotten wounds, and unfinished stories we may never fully understand. This awareness softens pride, it weakens revenge, it deepens patience. There is perhaps no clearer sign of genuine maturity than the ability to remain compassionate without becoming naive, and to remain firm without becoming cruel. That balance transforms families, it transforms friendships, it transforms leaders. Most importantly, it transforms the person practicing it. Today, someone will likely test your patience, perhaps through criticism, perhaps through misunderstanding, perhaps through simple human imperfection. Before responding, pause. Ask yourself quietly, what burden might I not be seeing? You may still need to speak honestly. You may still need to establish boundaries. But let understanding arrive before judgment. Respond with understanding before judgment, because compassion guided by wisdom is not weakness. It is one of the highest forms of strength the human soul can possess. Chapter 14. Simplicity, the forgotten luxury. Modern life has given humanity more conveniences than any civilization before it. Yet many people have never felt more mentally exhausted. Their calendars overflow, their homes overflow, their minds overflow. Ancient sages would likely find this strange. They believed the greatest luxury was never owning more, it was needing less. There is an old saying whispered among mountain monks: a crowded room is easier to clean than a crowded mind. Its wisdom becomes clearer with age. Most people imagine complexity is the price of importance. The ancients often believed the opposite. They observed that nature accomplishes extraordinary things through remarkable simplicity. Rivers flow without argument. Trees grow without competition. The stars keep their silent order without hurry. The universe rarely wastes movement. Why should we? An old merchant once traveled across several kingdoms, seeking the happiest people alive. He visited wealthy cities filled with magnificent architecture, marketplaces overflowing with rare treasures, and palaces decorated with unimaginable luxury. Yet peace seemed strangely absent. Eventually, his journey led him to an elderly potter living beside a quiet river. The potter owned little, a modest home, simple clothing, a small workshop. Still, every morning he greeted the sunrise with visible joy. The merchant finally asked, "How can your life be so peaceful when you possess so little?" The old craftsman smiled while shaping clay upon his wheel. "I spent many years collecting things." He paused. "Then I discovered they were collecting me." Those words changed the traveler forever. Possessions themselves are not the problem. Possession by possessions is. Ancient philosophers consistently warned against unnecessary accumulation. Not because beauty or comfort were wrong, but because every unnecessary burden quietly demanded attention. Every object requires care. Every unnecessary commitment requires energy. Every endless distraction requests another piece of the mind. Eventually, attention becomes fragmented. Peace disappears unnoticed. Lao Tzu often suggested that emptiness possesses its own usefulness. A cup serves because of the space inside it. A room becomes livable because of what is left open. Likewise, a peaceful life depends not only upon what we include, but also upon what we intentionally leave out. Space creates clarity. Silence creates insight. Stillness creates wisdom. There is an ancient story about a king who sought instruction from a humble gardener. Expecting profound speeches, the king instead watched the old man carefully remove dead branches from a fruit tree. Hours passed. Finally, the impatient ruler asked, "When will the lesson begin?" The gardener looked up. "It already has." The king frowned. "I do not understand. You wish to grow fruit," the gardener replied, "but first I remove what no longer gives life." The king never forgot those words. Neither should we. Growth often begins with subtraction. Modern psychology confirms what ancient wisdom long suspected. Every unfinished task, every unnecessary decision, and every excess demand places a subtle burden upon attention. This invisible weight gradually becomes mental fatigue. We call it stress. The ancients often called it disorder. Simplicity restores order. Consider the lives of many remarkable thinkers throughout history. Marcus Aurelius wrote quietly before dawn. Socrates wandered through the marketplace, owning remarkably little. Early philosophers found long walks more valuable than endless entertainment. Their outer lives were often simpler because their inner lives demanded room to breathe. They understood something we easily forget. The soul requires silence just as the body requires sleep. Without it, perception becomes clouded. Judgment weakens. Joy becomes difficult to recognize. There is another tale about an elderly woman known throughout her village for extraordinary happiness. Visitors often asked why she smiled so easily. Despite living in a tiny cottage, she answered by inviting them inside. The home contained only what she truly used, nothing more. One visitor remarked, "Your house feels larger than mine, even though mine is 3 times the size." The woman laughed gently, because peace needs space. How many burdens do we carry simply because we have never questioned them? Old resentments, unnecessary obligations, endless comparisons, the pressure to impress strangers, the habit of saying yes when wisdom whispers no. These are heavier than furniture. They occupy the mind long after the day has ended. Ancient wisdom invites another way, not withdrawal from life, but intentional living, keeping what nourishes, releasing what distracts, choosing depth over excess, meaning over accumulation, presence over endless pursuit. Simplicity is not about deprivation. It is about liberation. The person who requires little cannot easily be manipulated by promises of more. The person who knows what truly matters cannot be distracted by every passing desire. That is genuine freedom. Today, remove one unnecessary burden. Perhaps an object you no longer need. Perhaps a commitment that no longer reflects your values. Perhaps a resentment you have carried far too long. Perhaps simply 1 hour of unnecessary noise. Small acts of simplification create remarkable space, and within that space, something ancient quietly returns. Clarity, peace, your own forgotten self, because the greatest luxury has never been possessing everything. It has always been discovering how little is needed to live wisely, love deeply, and walk through life with an unburdened heart. Chapter 15. Becoming the person wisdom requires. There comes a quiet moment in every life when a person realizes that knowledge alone has changed nothing. Shelves may be filled with books, journals may overflow with profound quotations, and countless hours may have been spent listening to wise teachers. Yet when hardship arrives, fear still takes command, anger still speaks first, and old habits quietly reclaim the throne. This realization can be painful, but the ancient masters regarded it as one of the greatest blessings. It marks the moment when the seeker stops collecting wisdom and begins becoming it. Across the ancient world, wisdom was never measured by what someone knew. It was measured by who they had become. The oldest traditions rarely praised cleverness for its own sake. They admired character, a person's speech, patience, courage, humility, and consistency revealed the true depth of their understanding. In many mystery schools, students were deliberately kept waiting for years before receiving advanced instruction. Not because the teachers wished to hide knowledge, but because knowledge placed into an undisciplined mind often becomes another form of pride. A story preserved through generations tells of a young traveler who crossed mountains seeking a renowned sage. After months of difficult travel, he finally reached the master's humble dwelling. Expecting secret scrolls and extraordinary teachings, he eagerly asked, "Master, what is the first lesson?" The old man simply smiled and handed him a broom. "For 1 year," he said, "sweep these paths." The young traveler felt insulted. Had he crossed deserts merely to become a servant? Yet he stayed. Every morning he swept leaves. Every evening new leaves covered the path again. At first he complained silently. Then frustration became acceptance. Eventually acceptance became peace. He noticed the changing seasons, the songs of birds, the movement of the wind, and the quiet rhythm of his own thoughts. Something within him began changing long before he realized it. 1 year later, the master returned and asked, "What have you learned?" The traveler answered softly, "The path I thought I was cleaning has been cleaning me." That was the true beginning of his education. The ancient initiations followed this same hidden principle. Transformation always preceded revelation. Before teaching the deepest truths about reality, the teachers first reshaped the student's character. They understood that the greatest danger was not ignorance, but giving great wisdom to someone ruled by vanity, impatience, or fear. This insight echoes throughout philosophy. Aristotle taught that excellence is not an isolated achievement, but a habit formed through repeated action. A courageous person is not someone who performs one heroic deed. Courage is built through countless ordinary moments when fear appears, yet wisdom quietly chooses the next step anyway. Character, then, is not a possession. It is a practice. Every decision strengthens a hidden identity. Every repeated action whispers an answer to the question, "Who am I becoming?" Modern psychology has begun observing what ancient philosophers understood intuitively. Human beings act consistently with the identity they believe they possess. Someone who secretly believes they are incapable often abandons opportunities before success has time to appear. Another who believes they are disciplined naturally behaves in ways that reinforce that belief. Identity quietly directs behavior long before behavior produces visible results. The ancients recognized this invisible architecture of the soul. They understood that changing external circumstances without transforming identity merely creates temporary improvement. Eventually, old habits rebuild the old life. Imagine two sculptors receiving identical blocks of marble. One strikes the stone randomly whenever inspiration arrives. The other approaches each day with patience, removing only what does not belong. Years later, one block remains rough and unfinished, while the other reveals a masterpiece. Life shapes character in much the same way. Every challenge removes something unnecessary. If we allow it, every disappointment exposes hidden attachments. Every success tests humility. Every failure tests perseverance. Nothing is wasted. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself repeatedly that each morning would present difficult people, unexpected obstacles, and frustrating events. Yet, instead of viewing them as interruptions, he considered them opportunities to practice patience, justice, and self-command. Life itself became his training ground. That perspective transforms everything. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" the wiser question becomes, "What quality is this moment inviting me to develop?" The answer may be courage, it may be compassion, it may be restraint, it may simply be patience. Ancient wisdom teaches that every circumstance secretly offers an invitation to become someone greater than we were yesterday. Integrity occupies a special place within this journey. The ancients believed integrity was invisible power. A person whose words, actions, and inner convictions aligned possessed a strength impossible to imitate. Such people required little persuasion because their lives themselves became evidence. Integrity grows quietly. No audience applauds it. No crowds celebrate it. Yet it becomes the foundation upon which lasting peace is built. The greatest initiations were never ceremonies performed in magnificent temples. They unfolded in ordinary moments, choosing honesty when deceit seemed easier, remaining calm when anger promised satisfaction, acting kindly when no reward could be expected. These unseen victories shape destiny far more than dramatic achievements. Eventually, the seeker discovers that wisdom is less concerned with extraordinary experiences than with extraordinary consistency. The sacred path is walked one ordinary day at a time, one honest conversation, one disciplined decision, one compassionate response, one courageous step. Over years, these seemingly insignificant choices accumulate until the individual scarcely resembles the person they once were. Transformation rarely announces itself. It arrives quietly, like dawn. One morning, the traveler awakens and realizes the old fears no longer command him. The same difficulties remain, yet his relationship to them has changed. That invisible shift is the true initiation. Ancient teachers often said that we should admire virtue rather than success, because success may depend partly upon fortune, while virtue always depends upon deliberate choice. Perhaps this is why the wisest among them seemed strangely peaceful regardless of circumstances. Their security no longer depended upon changing events. It rested upon becoming the kind of person capable of meeting whatever life presented. The invitation remains exactly the same today. Do not ask only what wisdom can teach you. Ask what wisdom requires you to become. For knowledge informs the mind, character transforms the soul, and the soul ultimately shapes the life. Become what you admire. Chapter 16. The Ancient Secret of a Meaningful Life. After thousands of years, countless civilizations, and generations of philosophers who spoke different languages beneath different skies, one remarkable pattern quietly emerges. Whether they walked among the olive groves of Greece, the mountain monasteries of Asia, the deserts of Egypt, or the peaceful villages of the East, the greatest teachers repeatedly arrived at the same destination. The purpose of life is not merely to possess more, it is to become more. The sacred path has never been about escaping the world. It has always been about learning how to walk through the world with wisdom instead of confusion, courage instead of fear, and peace instead of endless striving. Many people spend decades believing happiness waits beyond one more achievement, one larger home, one final promotion, or one future circumstance. Yet history quietly tells another story. Some of the wealthiest individuals lived in constant anxiety, while many who possessed little radiated extraordinary serenity. The difference was not what surrounded them. The difference was what governed them. Ancient philosophy consistently teaches that lasting peace begins within. External comforts certainly have value, but they cannot permanently satisfy a restless mind. A person carrying inner disorder into abundance simply magnifies that disorder. Another carrying wisdom into difficulty often discovers unexpected freedom even in modest circumstances. This is the paradox the ancient masters tried to preserve. The outer world reflects the inner one more faithfully than most people imagine. Throughout this journey, we have walked beside many remarkable teachers. We have listened to the calm discipline of the Stoics, who reminded us that our responses remain our greatest freedom. We have entered the cave with Plato and discovered that many fears are little more than shadows mistaken for reality. We have stood beside Socrates, who confessed that genuine wisdom begins with recognizing how much remains unknown. We have learned from Aristotle that character is built one deliberate habit at a time. We have followed the gentle insights of early Buddhist philosophy, discovering that clinging creates suffering, while awareness quietly loosens its grip. Though their words differed, their direction remained astonishingly consistent. Master yourself. Everything else follows. The sacred path is not hidden because it is complicated. It is hidden because it is simple enough to overlook. Practice honesty, choose patience, cultivate gratitude, speak carefully, listen deeply, forgive quickly, remain humble, serve generously. Protect your attention, guard your character. Repeat these ordinary acts long enough, and extraordinary transformation quietly unfolds. Many ancient traditions compared wisdom to tending a garden. No gardener expects seeds to become trees overnight. The soil must be prepared, weeds patiently removed, and seasons respectfully honored. Growth cannot be forced, but it can certainly be nurtured. Human character grows in exactly the same way. Every day offers another opportunity to plant. Every conversation waters something. Every decision becomes another seed. Eventually, the harvest appears, not suddenly, but inevitably. This perspective changes the meaning of success itself. Success is no longer measured only by possessions or recognition. It is measured by the person you become while pursuing worthy goals. Can you remain kind when misunderstood? Can you remain truthful when deception appears easier? Can you remain grateful during uncertainty? Can you remain calm amid chaos? These questions define a meaningful life far more deeply than any title ever could. Perhaps this explains why many of history's wisest figures possessed an unmistakable stillness. They had discovered that peace does not arrive after mastering life. Peace arrives while mastering oneself. That mastery never truly ends. It deepens, day after day, season after season, year after year. The sacred path remains open to anyone willing to walk it, not through dramatic revelations, not through secret ceremonies, but through faithful daily practice. For the next 30 days, accept a simple challenge inspired by these timeless teachings. Each evening, spend a few quiet moments reflecting upon your actions. Ask yourself not whether the day was successful, but whether you acted according to your highest principles. Practice one virtue intentionally each day. Choose patience, honesty, courage, humility, compassion, or generosity, and consciously express it in ordinary situations. Embrace one moment of complete silence. Leave behind distractions for a few minutes, and simply observe your own thoughts without judgment. Finally, express sincere gratitude, not only for remarkable events, but also for the ordinary blessings that quietly sustain your life. The breath in your lungs, a conversation with a friend, a meal shared with family, or the simple gift of another sunrise. These practices may appear small. They are not. History reminds us that civilizations were shaped by the daily habits of ordinary people, far more than by extraordinary moments. Your future character is being written today. One thought, one choice, one action at a time. The greatest secret the ancients preserved was never about controlling reality. It was about becoming the kind of person who could meet reality with wisdom, regardless of what it revealed. For when the inner life is ordered, the outer life gradually follows. That is the sacred path, and it begins exactly where you stand. The sacred path is not a road beneath your feet. It is the way you choose to walk through every moment of your life. The journey has never been somewhere else. It has always been within. Walk it well,